born under the TIVV3 star sign, a cat. Today we take a look at Asmongold, video called Blizzard exec reveals the real reason bad games go woke. Think of this as a bit of a follow-up video to my previous one. I do find this story quite fascinating. I like that it's low stakes, good opportunity to understand a bit more about how the world works.
Read Elon's tweet on Gamergate too. Elon Musk tweeted about this.
It's not that gamers are, upset about, oh, hey, we have some diversity in the game. It's actually the way that they go about it, with pure tokenism, with phoning in weak characters instead of creating strong new characters. And more importantly, it's about a vindictiveness to destroy the past, to destroy the IP, to ignore the source material, and to tear apart these beloved characters in some sort of fitful rage.
Looks like that this could be happening.
That we don't understand and is very disingenuous.
I think he's right about that, by the way. I don't think that people have a problem whenever a game, like, for example, like people might meme on Forspoken or something like that, but it's its own IP. So, like, if people don't like the game, then they don't like the game. That's up to them. But I think what people really have a problem with is whenever you go into an existing franchise and you change things retroactively.
Or when you don't release more Legacy of Kain games because you want to make Batman games and they might compete with your Batman games. That's another thing I'm gonna keep holding against that company. I forgot which company, but it is what it is.
I think that is the tremendous reaction to Suicide Squad, and this is going to have an immense financial impact. The way games are funded, you don't use...
Really nothing wrong with enjoying your Batman games, although sometimes the guy's a little too much of a vigilante. That is for sure.
Your own money, even EA. Okay, games are hugely expensive to make. They're upwards of $250, sometimes $600 million.
Probably Diablo 4
for certain live games. It's incredibly how expensive they are, and to do that, your CFO is your best friend. You're counting on your CFO to get you tax breaks, to get you in, to put studios in regions which are financially favorable,
tax breaks.
And you will borrow the cheap money. You will get a cheap money to do it. Even EA
can
does.
get
I
extra
worked with
cheap
EA.
rates.
We were putting together a deal where they were taking bailout money from the banks in the last financial crisis that we had.
The last
and they were applying that cheap money towards games. Same thing with COVID money. They're applying that cheap money towards games. And what has been the cheapest money while interest rates were still low, a couple of years ago? It was ESG financing.
So this reveals a lot. This reveals that the companies are assuming that it's true. Big assuming, right? Is Mark Kern telling the truth or not? Is he lying? It's hard to say. He's either lying or telling the truth based off of if you agree with him or not. But I think that if you assume that it is true, it means that the companies are actually only pushing for any of this stuff because it's the easiest thing to do. It's like in a video game where like the most efficient way of farming is by like doing something extremely fucking boring, but like doing it 1,000 times, and everybody's doing that. And then the developer's thinking, oh my God, people must really love this content. But no, they're just metagaming the system. Yeah, you think they, exactly. And I think it goes back to what I was saying before, right? About how these companies don't genuinely care about any of these problems or any of these people.
And so they're going to take this money and they're going to put it into games. But now that they don't have that money anymore because ESG is either being diminished or rebranded because the returns on investment have been so poor on Wall Street for ESG funds, that source of revenue is drying up. This woke machine cannot continue in the way that it is now.
Well, of course it can't. But like the reason why is because the content isn't good. And you have to keep in mind, why is it that the funds are drying up? The reason why is because the people that are going after them can't get any other funds. So if you can't...
I wouldn't put it this black and white, but yeah.
Get any other funds from, people that like believe in your product. You can't get any funds from people that think that your product is going to make a lot of money. And the only way that you can get any money is if you add in some sort of like fake diversity to it.
Like you definitely need a different skill set to get the benefits, to get the grants, to get the ESG thing, than if you go for the other pool of money, which is the customer money, right? So there's different skill sets. And I'm not even saying you have to play to the smallest common denominator. You see, in Japan, anyway, there's so much diversity of people realizing their visions of a project. And then you have the shonen anime and whatnot, right? So it's like,
which is basically what he's saying, then yeah, big surprise, that's going to lose a lot of money because you're creating a selection.
So the thing is, you do have multiple target audiences to work with, and maybe even create your own if your vision is so compelling, right?
Bias again for the worst possible actors.
AAA gaming, and I think unfortunately it's so entrenched that you're not going to see much of an ability to course correct because the studios are
they're just going to shut down, right?
They're going to shut down.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay though.
This is truly the rise of AA
plenty
gaming,
studios that make great games.
What some of my fans call S-tier gaming. This is
like Helldivers.
Like Helldivers, Power World, the Diablo West game that came out.
Last Epoch.
The name of that. Really incredible success stories in a period where game companies are experiencing significant losses. The bleeding will.
Yeah, people love games. People just don't like games that suck. It's that simple.
It is that simple.
And no one's going to wake up from it. Unfortunately, it's going to be a total nosedive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's right about that or not. I mean, like whether this is going to actually just end up killing these studios or not. But maybe it will, because it's like, yeah, it's hard to get rid of people like that once you get them in there. For example, do you really think that EA cares about minorities? Do you really think Bobby Kotick cares about? Oh, there's more.
Yeah, no. And you see, the thing is, this is all kind of low stakes, so I think this is an interesting, learnable, teachable moment, right? Like, see the world, it goes a certain way, or sometimes not.
Or wait a second. Yeah, they don't really care about these things. All they care about is money. So the moment that they're not making money, they will kick these people out and post about it publicly to like basically as a public execution, and everybody will cheer. They'll be happy. But keep in mind, the company isn't doing this. It's not like the company learned, they learned from their bad actions.
They thought they would get money, and then they didn't.
They're only doing, they're like, oh, these people have more money. Well, let's go make these people happy.
There's a question, why did they think they could make money with this? Like, why do you believe that the people chasing the ESG fund money are going to be good at delivering a product that's enticing to minorities and also majorities maybe, but a minority can actually support financially a project, and it can be very successful too, so
happy instead. They don't care about you then. The only reason they care about you at that exact moment is because it is beneficial to them. That's it.
ESG funding and the way people bend budgets, you can take that same parallel to like Hollywood, right? There's a reason all those Hollywood films, all the woke Disney crap was filmed in Europe. They were getting like, I think for the Marvels, they got something like a $50 million tax break.
That's a lot of money.
It's not the tax break though.
And, all this kind of stuff. I happen to agree with you that I think the money's not gone, but I think it's not flowing as freely as it once was.
Well, after you have long enough for something like this to run its course and people see that it doesn't give returns.
Maybe a 50 million tax break is not really a good reason to choose a production location. It's not a bad one either, but it comes with strings.
Then people will stop supporting it. It's that simple.
It's not just money. Like you pointed out, different regions will offer tax credits. And these things come with strings attached, all right?
Right.
Political strings attached. And one thing that, everyone needs to realize is that it's not that these studios are funding the games out of their own pocket. That would be very expensive for them. Cash is king. They will preferably go out and get money from other sources if it's cheap enough to help spread the risk of these massive titles. And so you have a lot of quid pro quo happening.
Quid pro quo means you suck my dick, I'll suck yours.
And I can tell you that devs have been approaching.
An interesting point. Like, we probably do get some sort of kickback, legal kind of kickback from that. So maybe just another chapter in the short-termism saga.
me and giving me some inside baseball on what's been happening. And there are deals, funding deals out there for studios, and I can't get too specific. I don't want to out my sources that have certain strings attached.
Like, I'll do you a favor if you do me a favor.
A company will suddenly sign with a developer, and now that developer needs to hire a DEI director and needs to go out and hire consultancy firms to gender.
Yeah, and what if you don't find anyone who's actually going to help you make the product better, but instead is in some way actively hostile to the project? See, this would be a problem.
Creating a need.
Balance their staff, or quite specifically, go out and hire companies like SBI to consult on their writing and do sensitivity reading and changes for that. And what does all this do? It boosts their ESG score. It allows them access to that funding. So ESG is not going away entirely. It's become an evil.
ESG is not a bad thing fundamentally. So I'm going to give you another example of how ESG isn't a bad thing. And everybody is like mentally programmed to say ESG is bad. But please try to just bear with me here and try to listen and think about it objectively. So environmental, social governance. Social is only one part of that. Environmental is another. So, for example, there are a lot of laws in Europe that disallow people from having single-use types of like forks or plates or things like that whenever you go to a restaurant, like a fast food restaurant. So what the ESG would be for in that circumstance with a company like that would be making sure that these companies are compliant with future upcoming regulations in Europe that that regulate the way that things happen and the way that things are made in these restaurants. You see what I'm saying? Paper straws.
So companies can get a head start on the legislation that's going to come down the pike. Seems like an awfully specific way to do it. If it's just about plastic forks, I don't really think you can mess it up so badly, because there wouldn't be that much lost if you just banned them overnight, right? The industry would cope with that. It's not ultimately a bad point. It's just, this is not a great example from Asmongold here.
Shit. Yeah, exactly. And so if you are investing in a company, do you want to invest in a company that is future-proofing itself from regulation or not? Well,
the problem here is, how do you know that just looking at the ESG score? It's way too nebulous. And the incentives are way too messed up. The moment you start to make it mean anything beyond, like, okay, maybe there's going to be banned plastic forks and straws and whatnot. Like, so you see how this just becomes a complicated mess, and where's the accountability that this thing actually means what it's supposed to mean? Why not just have a timetable for when legislation for certain things is going to come into effect? Like, just pass laws as opposed to, okay, here's an ESG score. Like, the investor will know that this is really the good thing. And it's like, you don't really know that. Like, you don't know anything about the company's compliance with future law, even if they have a good ESG score, let alone the impact on the product.
I would say you absolutely want to invest in a company that's future-proof from regulation.
And yeah, sure.
It's common sense. It's reasonable. And any prudent person would think this is a good idea. So do you see kind of how, in some circumstances, ESG clearly makes sense? I disagree, because that's the premise, and reality is not the same.
There can be 10 variables in there that are weighted greatly that actually don't really help. But they look good. They have a high score because you aim for the cheap ones, the ones that make your score go up, but not the ones that actually matter for your future outlook as a company.
Same as words at snake oil? Well, I don't think that's true at all. I think that a lot of companies get invested in because they have a future-proofed business plan. But you're not hearing about those companies because you're not in the business of,
That is not exactly necessarily ESG. Again, I like the snake oil comment, because I wouldn't call it snake oil. I would just say it might as well be snake oil. How's the investor going to know that it's not?
No, making air conditioning units. Like, you're not hearing about that because the social thing is what we're always talking about. That's what's controversial. I think that
you can have dozens of environmental things that may or may not be in the environmental score, that again, that are cheap, that don't actually help the environment, that don't make at least not really, that don't make a company more of a good long-term hold. So even if you just reduce it to the environment, right? So I'm not saying it's snake oil, but again, it might as well be. How do you know?
It's common sense. It's reasonable that people are clearly going to want to invest in the companies that are future-proofing themselves from regulation. And that is also ESG. Does that make sense? It's risk.
Let's say if 10% of ESG is future-proofing with a bite, you know, like this is really going to make the company perform. And then 90% is just like fluff. Like, just be a bit more specific. So what are the things you're doing? Like, you don't get around that as an investor, and then now you get companies optimizing for their ESG scores so they get better credit terms and so on. Like, that's not a good idea.
Assessment, yeah, it's common sense. And also, like, and if people still want to complain about this, would you want the person who manages your money, if you have somebody manage your money, would you want them to not consider this?
I would want them to consider the specifics of any company in terms of how they future-proof.
With your money? No, I think you would want them to consider this very strongly. Would you want them to invest into a company who in 5 years, their business strategy will be completely illegal? No, you wouldn't want that. Asmon's saying the shit sandwich is fine because it comes with a sandwich? No, idiot. I am saying that there is shit in the sandwich, but the sandwich is not entirely made of shit. I'm not saying that you should eat the sandwich. I never said that you should eat the sandwich. I never said this is good in general. I said there are instances in which it is good, which is true. I gave you an example.
I'm still thinking it's a troubled proposition, but he also has a point that, yeah, we should consider these things, yes.
I don't think my example is a bad one. And as I see, there is nobody who's actually refuting this because it's common sense. And again,
and he is making the general point, so that's fair. I'm not really sure if he did it the best way possible, but anyway, the point to reiterate, as far as I'm concerned, anyway, is the way this is implemented does not indicate that it's gonna work particularly well. This is like the art of bullshitting people sometimes, I think, is you take like a good thing and then you just add a bunch of BS around it, right? So really good cause somewhere in there, but so this ain't it.
Again, I think anybody, if you were talking to an investor, you were investing your money, you would do the exact same thing. Now, people like to act like they don't because they don't want to reconcile the obvious.
I wouldn't go for this one single number indicator that's like 5 million different things in one.
Dissonance that they're creating because they're like, oh, I'm supposed to be against this, but then there's this other thing about it that's good. So then, no, I wouldn't do that, even though I would lose money, but I would lose money. Get the fuck out of here. It's so stupid. What do you do? What are some of these people in chat doing? What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, obviously, this is common sense.
What's with the music? What's happening? He's really responding to a lot of people.
Waste of fucking time. Let's move on.
It's not that gamers are
just listen to this.
Wild.
Right. Studio agree to do this. How could they do something that's so financially devastating to their games? And it's because they're kind of in this situation where that's the money they can get. And so, you know, you have this self-perpetuating machine, and I don't think, and that's why it's kind of a death spiral that I don't think you can really escape. The only way you can
they have to get rid of the funds, and they have to reappropriate the funds in a way that's more weighted towards things that are closer to a financial return. So, for example, like if you're investing in a company that is making sure that their company is future-proof from like environmental regulation, this is clearly a lot different than investing in a company that is adding in representation in a video game. Like in terms of like...
And you can add representation in a video game without it being a net negative. But so how do you know that the people you hire are going to do that? Well, you don't. So every bit of environmental planning for the future, every bit of socially aware planning for the future, they're all different. And you're all bunching this into this one variable. So maybe a first step would be to separate the environmental and the social part, but even then you're still dealing with a big mess. So I don't think it's gonna be workable to just have a single variable approach to this.
The direct correlation of how much money will be needed to spend in order to like change this or not change it. So that's really what the problem is. The problem is that like these two things should have never been combined.
And there sure is a bunch of ways to metagame the thing, I would assume.
if it is to make a good game. And if you're already reliant on ESG and you're already reliant on these other fundings because your games are too damn expensive to make, you're trapped.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
a great
okay.
point.
Some companies just got
to Hollywood,
reconsider.
I think you're going to see Hollywood. The $500 million movies are dead.
So yeah, in general, I'm going to be honest, right? I do think this is a huge problem, and I do think also, like what Mark Kern is saying, illuminates such a massive real issue that makes perfect sense. That these companies are only going after these funds because they're easy to get. So like, and I think it makes sense, right? Because like it also creates a feedback loop of the bad games can't get funding from any other place, so they go for ESG, and then if they're only getting ESG funding because they're bad, well then the game's going to be bad. So was it really the ESG that made the game bad, or was it the bad game that had to go for funding and could only get ESG? You see how this happens, right? Both? Maybe, right? But like you can see how there's clearly a feedback loop where bad games will pursue this more often because they can't get other types of funding.
It's a
spectrum.
I
think Suicide Squad is the best example for that. And you can even see that with the fact that even Warner Brothers delayed Suicide Squad because they knew it was bad. The well will dry up eventually. I think it's drying up already. I think that you can tell that it's drying up whenever you look at some of these games and you see how unpopular they are.
Is this why they keep getting weird games for free on Epic Games Store? I don't know. Anyway, this was a fascinating video. Former Blizzard game executive Mark Kern was the main person we listened to there, besides Asmon. Makes sense they would be saying that, if that's their experience. Hope you enjoyed the update on the situation. It was more like a meta conversation. I liked it too. That people are slowly figuring out that, yeah, there are incentive structures at play. It's not important to have a hot take first and then throw everything else under the bus, besides like, oh these people are bad or good or whatever. No, like, there's a structure in play. And we can take our time at our leisure. We can dissect what's going on and maybe also entertain that this is true for many things in the world. But anyway, hope you enjoyed it. We'll link the vid below in the description. Maybe leave a like at Asmongold's channel for the vid and the sub and so on. Maybe do that over here as well. Slam the bell, as they say. Leave a comment, share the video. And with that said, I hope you have a good one. This cat only wants the best for you. Stay safe out there. I hope we meet again. Meow.